I've been working in the digital industry for about 12 years now, starting an interactive agency inside of a traditional agency first at Grey in Copenhagen. I then joined what later became Framfab in Denmark and worked there for about 7 years, and I've been in the US now for about 3 years. Well, I think some of the interesting trends that we're seeing is towards brands creating something that's eminently usable for people. A good example is Nike Plus, which is really more of a social utility. It defines a new category. It makes running a more social sport than it's ever been before. So brands creating tools that users can use in their daily lives, I think is definitely something we'll be seeing much more of. Widgets is another thing that everybody's talking about at the moment. Simple little tools that the brand gives you that you can put on your Facebook, on your blog, your website, wherever you attract people you want people to go to. So kind of portable content that becomes relevant through use, if you will. Well, one thing that's constantly annoying me that we're not really seeing here is that the use of video seems to be living within the same metaphor as TV or film. We're not really reinventing video for online, which is something I thought was going to happen a long time ago, but it hasn't really materialized. The only places you see innovation in the video space is really in places like South Korea, where they have broadband that's completely different to anything that we know in the West. It's so much faster, and the things you can do become mind-boggling. You'll see, for instance, parallel video streams communicating with each other, stories being told through multiple video streams that interact with each other and lets the user interact with the way a story is being narrated and told. And I think that's sort of what we should be looking at. So rather than see or talk about what's been happening in the past, we should look at what are the possibilities for the future. And I'm just really not seeing that yet, especially with a category such as viral, which is essentially just, quote, good advertising that people think is fun enough to send to somebody else. While it's totally valid, it's still just doing 0.1% of what the medium is capable of. So rather than reinvent TV, I think we should invent something brand new. The reasons why we're not doing it is partially due to technological advances that haven't really come totally to fruition yet in most of the world. But I think it's also because there's a comfort zone where a lot of agencies and a lot of production companies they're thinking in a very linear way of telling a story, rather than an interactive way, a way that engages the user in the story itself. And I think the fresh thinking needs to come from younger people who haven't told stories in a traditional fashion before. So they're capable of rethinking the way of communicating. And that's really not happening to a very large extent yet, but I think it will over the next couple of years. I think the reason why Japan is so far ahead in terms of mobile technology is partly historical and partly due to some socioeconomic factors that are very different from any other places in the world. Historically, they were very early out of the gate developing mobile phones out there. And the interesting fact is that only 20% of all people in Japan have personal computers at home. And most of them, or a lot of them at least, live in tiny apartments. So they really don't spend a lot of time there. So it was crucial and essential for digital communication to really take off that they managed to get it onto a tool that you could carry with you everywhere. And that's one of the reasons why they started very early on thinking, if we can move anything that happens on a computer onto a cell phone, then we'll have invented the perfect tool for our society. That's not necessarily been the case in the rest of the world, where personal computers were prevalent and still are. Almost everybody has one now. So maybe there isn't the same need to get content onto mobile that can live on a personal computer. In the US, for instance, we're facing some other challenges that the networks there just have been fighting each other for years and have had different standards, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just been incredibly difficult to do anything for mobile without having to do it in 3-4 different formats. And what we're finding also is that mobile content appeals a lot to a younger generation, but once you reach a certain age, people are basically going, well, I'm not going to watch TV on my mobile screen, or whatever else content we might be talking about. But with the advent of the iPhone, it's going to be interesting to see whether that is going to be that massive change that some people expect it to be in the Western world, where all of a sudden you have a decent-sized screen, you should be able to get good streaming onto it, and companies like Juiced, who are coming out with internet-based high-quality television, and I will eat my arm if their next move isn't to stream that onto phones. So there's some things happening in technology and in content providers that might make the mobile phone more relevant and more interesting over the next couple of years. I don't think interactivity necessarily has to live just in digital media as they've been conceived so far. I think we're seeing more and more digital outdoor, where people use phones to communicate with billboards and have a brand experience on the street wherever they are. You're seeing more and more touch screens at bus stops, et cetera, et cetera. So I think digital is definitely leaving the computer and moving into the real world, both on mobile phones, as we were talking about before, but also in digital screens in various places in the world. But there's a category in certain award shows called interactive TV, and you're not really seeing a lot of interesting solutions there. There's certain good things that Sky TV in the UK have done, for instance. But I think, again, coming back to what I said before about rethinking the way we're telling stories, is we just need to go back to the well and say, what's a good story? I think everybody agrees on what a good story is to a certain extent, but then you have radically different ways of telling that story, and one of them has to incorporate interactivity so the user becomes much more part of the storytelling himself. The big question is whether there is even going to be such a thing as a digital agency in the future. It remains to be seen, but I think all agencies will, per definition, be digital in the future and work with digital media, since that's where the consumers are, so that's where communication will be housed. One of the big challenges we're facing today, I usually use this metaphor when talking about it, which is that when you're doing a film, you spend about 20% of the money on the trailer and the marketing, and then 80% of the budget on the film itself. Well, today, most TV ads are basically just the trailer for an interactive experience where the brand lives and you can create experiences that people can engage in and spend time with. But there's something completely wrong with the metrics and the economics in that, because you're spending 80% on shooting a TV ad and 20% of the budget on creating that digital home for the brand. So again, going back to the movie metaphor, you'd never do that. You obviously wouldn't spend 80% on doing the trailer and 20% on the movie. So you need to reconsider how you're spending your budget if you want to speak to a modern consumer and what the roles of the individual mediums are. I think digital overall is a fantastic vehicle for social responsibility and getting brands involved with social responsibilities. I think we'll see a huge influx of political discussions into social networks during the presidential election coming up in 2008 in the US. You're starting to see it already, how politicians are sort of adapting to the buzz of the web and working with people directly, talking to people directly. I just saw the Grand Prix winner for outdoor. I don't know if you've seen it, but what it basically is, it's an African bank who put up a billboard, and on top of the billboard they put solar cells. So that the solar cells create enough energy to run a kitchen for 1,100 kids in a school, so that they basically get free electricity from the bank. So that's a bank coming out and saying, well, we take good care of your money for you, but we're also, as part of our advertising, giving back to the community. And the whole giving back to the community, especially in an era where everybody's talking about global warming and all the things that no one person can change, we need to all work together in order to facilitate that change. So, so the web should and will be a massive player in that global consciousness and raising global awareness and collaborating. Well, I mean, obviously there needs to be some kind of clear division between what is branding and what is social responsibility. But I think if you can manage to integrate the two into one piece of work, so it is the brand giving back to the society, but you're also at the same time selling a brand, so you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. I think that's a great constellation where everybody benefits in the end. I'm sure that you can probably misuse that and come across as an opportunist who's just piggybacking on some topic that's of this day and age and people are interested in. But if you do it intelligently, I think everybody benefits.